College that was based in Padua of yesteryear from the 1800s, 19th century, respectively, that made many changes all throughout the years, and explore a few tidbits with regards to the history of the college. It's actually been named under various different names, and you could actually say it was also called, to give it its full title, the Collegio Rabbinico Italiano, the Italian Rabbinical College. And I think it was founded back in the year 1829 in Padua. As I'll state it, I think it's in Italian over here, which I've been given. The Istituto Convizio Rabbinico degli Israeliti del Regno Lombardo Veneto, the rabbinical boarding school of the Israelites of the Lombard Venetian Kingdom. I hope I pronounced that correctly. My language skills outside of the Ivrit and English realm is not necessarily the best. Let's just say it was at the behest of the authorities of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. The Padua at the time was part of the Lombard Venetian, let's just say, kingdom, which was in turn part of the Habsburg Empire. It would join the newly formed Kingdom of Italy during, let's say, the unification process back in the year 1866. Okay, now this institute itself, the Rabbinical Seminary, let's just say, was founded through the efforts of famous Rabbonim, including Rabbi Isacco Samuele Reggio, a rabbi we've spoken about on the series before here as we explore some biography videos about famous Rabbonim. And it was under the direction of Lelio della Torre and Professor, you could say also Rabbi Samuel David Lazzato, also popularly known as the Shadal, another famous rabbi. I think he was a great nephew of the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lazzato, respectively. Now, the institute itself would have a goal of training a new generation of Italian rabbis. That was one of the, let's say, with a solid preparation in both religious and secular disciplines. That was one of the goals of the Rabbinical College in itself. The institute represented a turning point in the Jewish educational landscape of the time at that point in time. Now, obviously, there was a more modern approach and a national outlook, let's just say. And yet that the nation wasn't, let's say, unified as itself at that point in stage. It had immediately among the students some future rabbis that would become rabbis over there. There became in later years some very learned, let's just say, and prestigious rabbinical authorities in Europe, such as Rabbi Cantoni, I believe, and Rabbi Gentiloma, and Rabbi Lattes, Lolli, Lazzato, also various Lazzatos, also actually recorded a video on the, let's just say, rabbinic family of the Lazzato family at one stage in time, and Manissa and Mortara, respectively. Now, I think Rabbi Shadal, Rabbi Shmuel Lazzato, who passed away in the year 1665. We're going to speak about him in due course. Also, Della Torres passed away. The institute would go and end up going under various different changes at that point in time. It would temporarily close in the year 1871. I think in 1882, the institute was reopened and moved to Rome at that point in time from Padua, which, let's say, became the capital of the newly unified country and took on the current name of the Collegio Rabbinico Italiano, the Italian Rabbinic College at that stage in time. Very interesting enough. And it was under the direction of someone with the name M. Ehrenreich. I'm not too sure if he was a rabbi or not. So please, if anyone knows any more information, please let me know. I think come with the year 1899, it was reported over. I had a friend that is very well versed in this, chronicle to me that after a period of suspended activity, it would be moved to Florence under the direction of Margulis at that point, S.H. Margulis, with Chagers and Elbogun. I'm not sure if these were Rabbonim or not, were among the teachers over there of the college at that point in time would start to flourish. Various different alumni who we're going to speak about in due course included Rabbi Cassuto, Rabbi Disegni, also Rabbi Pacifici. I think we spoke about some of these rabbis, and Rabbi Prato. They would exert, let's say, a marked influence on Italian Judaism at that point in time. I think come with the year 1922, Rabbi Margulis passed away, and the Collegio would move back to Rome in the year 1934, would be directed by the Rabbi of Rome, the Rome community at that time, Rabbi Sacerdoti, very famous enough. And we've actually spoken about him also on this series over here also. And there would be various different other Rabbonim, I think, at that stage in time. And I think it would face another closure because of the fascist regime will come into being, but the college will be eventually reopened again in the year 1955, respectively. Very interesting enough. So let's explore a few of the highlights of the famous Rabbinical College over here. We wanted to record this video for a long time, and finally we've actually got to do that in itself. I think it was actually in the year 1829 when I think it was upon an edict of the Emperor Francis I that it would be open in. Remember, he was Holy Roman Emperor, let's just say, from 1745 to 1765, and various. Let's just say, much can be said about him. Obviously, at Padua, with the Corporation of Venice, it will be opened, and also of Verona and Mantua, the first Italian Rabbinical College, in which at that point in time, someone named Lelio della Torre lived between the year 1805 to 1871, happened to be a Jewish scholar, a poet writing in Italian, German, French, and Hebrew, also known for, let's say, translation of the Book of Psalms. I think more on the critical, let's just say, spectrum of that itself. I think he was the son of Solomon J.L. Raphael Cohen, a chief rabbi of Konya. So it's given him his title. He was a rabbi, and we'll have to speak about him at a later stage in time. But very much would help within regards to the opening of this. I think he was an author also. If you look at his bibliography, it was quite large, respectively, in of itself. So he was, I think he would become a professor of Talmud, homiletics, theology at that point in time in this rabbinical seminary, and I think he would hold this position until he passed away. And it's interesting enough, I don't think he actually served as a rabbi, except for a brief interval in the 1869 following the passing of the rabbi of Padua. He was married to a woman of the name Rabbinit Anna Balethio, and they would go on to have 7 children. So he's a key person within regards to this rabbinical seminary. Rabbi Lelio Hillel della Torre. So hopefully we will speak about him at a later stage in this series over here. Yeah, so also Rabbi Samuel David Luzzatto would actually go on to teach there. He was a great man of intellect. As we said before, I think he was a great nephew of the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. And let's speak a few words with regards to the Shadal himself. That's what his nickname actually happened to be. He was born in the 1800 at the start of the 19th century. He passed away on the 30th of September in 1865. He was obviously known as Shadal, was an Italian-Austrian Jewish scholar, a poet, and let's explore a bit. I think he was actually born in the area of Trieste. I think he would go on to pass away in Padua in 1865. I think it was actually on Yom Kippur he passed away on the 10th of Tishrei. And he was learning at a young age at the Talmud Torah, and I think he was taught by a rabbi named Rabbi Abraham Eliezer Halevi, who was the chief rabbi of Trieste at the time, and was very, very famous in itself, respectively. And he would go on, Rabbi Luzzatto, to have an ability even from younghood, while he read various different Hebrew parts of the Tanakh and study in detail, and write, let's just say, writings on it, respectively. And he's very, very famous rabbi. We actually walked past a street that was named after him, I believe, close to the Jaffa Street, famously not long ago. I think in 1814, I think the year his mother passed away, he would obviously that would leave an imprint on him, and he would help his father in his work. And then, but I think come 1815, he would start composing 37 poems at that stage of point in time. 1818, he would write his Torah Nidreshet, wrote the Shadal would respectively. And I think from 1824, that was the year his father passed away, he would, let's just say, be very, very self-dependent. He would start learning a livelihood in 1829, giving lessons over, and he would be appointed a professor already in the Rabbinical College of Padua, which we're speaking about today, come out the year 1829. He would write various different books. He had a view on philosophy, let's just say, in of itself. He was, as described over, a warm defender of biblical and Talmudic Judaism, and reported over had a strong opposition to philosophical Judaism, let's just say, which would bring him opponents during among his contemporaries, let's just say. I think he praised Maimonides as author of Mishnah Torah, respectively, and will write many, many different works, I think specifically in Hebrew and various other languages, especially in Italian, respectively. Among his Hebrew writings of the Shadal, Rabbi Shlomo David Luzzatto would include the Kino Naim, for example, which is printed in 1825, Kina, which is printed in Trieste, Ohev Ger, the Hafla'a Sheba Arachin, the Seder Tanaim ve'Amorim, this would be printed, I think, in Prague, the Betulat Bet Yehuda, the Avnei Zicharon, the Beta Otza, Hamshtadel, various other books. Ma'amar B'Yusdei HaDiktuk, this was in Vienna, I think, around the time period he passed away in 1865. Na'alat Shadal, which was printed, I think, in Germany after he passed away. Tal Orot, and there was various different other books in Italian and more Hebrew books also, respectively. So he was a famous rabbi at that time, and will be a professor also of this Rabbinical College. And I think various other people would actually, let's say, become distinguished rabbis at this, let's say, this very, very famous college in itself. So another rabbi named Rabbi Samuel Vita Zelman. I think he was born in 1808, passed in 1885. He was obviously an Italian Jewish writer. He was educated, actually, interesting enough, in the Rabbinical College of Padua. He was a favorite student of Rabbi the Shadal, Rabbi Samuel David Luzzatto. He would go on to author various works, including, I think, the Kina of the passing of the Shadal, respectively, in 1865. I think La Porel di U Igronte El Doti, I think, which is printed 1855. Also, he would complete edition of various Hebrew essays, hymns, letters, elegiac poems. I think Hebrew poem book will be printed in Trieste in the year 1883, also respectively. So very interesting enough. And yeah, I think more would be published within regards to his teachings. I think especially from Rabbi Vittorio Castiglione, under the name the Ne'im Zimrot Shmuel, I think in 1886, and various things. But he passed away himself in 1885, and he would become a key man within regards to this rabbinical college also. Who else? There was another rabbi, a famous one of the name, I'll say his name in English, or pronounced different ways, Rabbi Moses Tudesi, I think, or also Rabbi Moshe Yitzhak Ashkenazi. He was an Italian rabbi, a biblical commentator itself, respectively, and was known for the commentary of the Hoil Moshe. I think he himself was born in the year 1821, passed away in 1898. He would live in Italy, in Trieste, and let's just say, obviously, he was also a Talmid of Rabbi Shmuel Chaim Zalman, and Rabbi the Shadal, also Rabbi Shmuel David Luzzatto. I think he would be very much involved also to some capacity within regards to the Rabbinical seminary, also respect. So that is very well, including the Musa, let's just say, this Italian rabbi did. And other people, I think there was various other rabbis. I think maybe a Rabbi Castiglione, who we've spoken about before, would be connected also, and to this school itself. They stay over also that Rabbi Eliyahu Ben Moser, I think he was a famous, obviously, Italian Sephardic Orthodox rabbi. He was known as a Jewish Kabbalist, very respected in his day, especially in Italy, was seen as one of the most, let's say, famous scholars over there at that point in time. He was, let's say, distinguished himself in the old rabbinical school of Leron, respectively. So we'll just have to add that as a footnote. He actually passed away himself, Rabbi Ben Moser, I think in the year 1900. He was born in 1823, respectively. So he was very, very much a famous rabbi of his time. So let's just speak a bit more. We're going to go to a detailed article within regards to the seminary, respectively, in a minute. But we know that this college was established in Padua in 1829 by a rabbi of Rabbi Reggio. I think it's very important we speak about him. It was, first of all, just before we speak about him, I believe it was the first modern institution for training rabbis at that point in time in Italy. And obviously, I think at that point in time, Italy was one of the smaller European Jewish communities and had a high degree of integration into modernity of the Italian Jewish community. And I think very interesting that I think they would also have a famous library, if I'm not mistaken, this rabbinical seminary did in of itself, which we're going to speak about in due course. But I think it's important we do speak about Rabbi Reggio also, because he was one of the founding, let's just say, rabbis or founding members of this, let's just say, this community in of itself. We actually, I think at the time of recording, it happens to be his Hilula at the moment. His name, to give him his full title, Rabbi Isaac Samuel Reggio. He was born in the year 1784, passed away in 1855, obviously an Austro-Italian scholar. He would go on to pass away in Gorizia, respectively. I think just to give a bit of information in regards to him, he would study rabbinics under Rabbi Abraham Witter, I think Lech was later on the rabbi of Gorizia, respectively, and he knew various different languages, Rabbi Reggio did, including French, German, and Latin, and studied several Semitic languages also, in addition to Hebrew, respectively. He most famously, I think, was connected to Pythagorean theorem, which was, I think, well known. Was praised by various different French mathematicians. He, in 1803, would move to Trieste. I think he would be a tutor over there in the house of a wealthy family at that point in time. And I think, yeah, very interesting enough. He had taken on very famous roles. I think he was connected to various different Rabbonim. And we said, I think, he had a... he would use someone of the name, a rabbi, I think was more connected to the Haskalah movement, Rabbi Hartwig Wesley, as a guide, which we've spoken about before. And it's actually interesting. I'll state over what it actually says. I'm just reading from Wikipedia over here. It would say when the province of Lyra in 1810 became a French dependency, Rabbi Reggio was appointed by the French governor, professor of Belles Lettres, geography and history, and chancellor of the Lycée of Gorizia. But I think 3 years later, I think Lyria became again an Austrian, let's just say, a province, and the Austria and anti-Jewish laws compelled Reggio to resign. He would devote himself exclusively to Jewish literature and cognate subjects, even studied Kabbalah. But then he studied it. The greater grew his aversion to, let's just say, its mystical and allegedly, let's say, doctrines. Let's just say, himself. This is his opinion, not mine. This is what I'm just reading over Wikipedia over here. And I think he would take people like Moses Mendelssohn and Hartwig Wesley as guides, and would let's say, I want to say on the onset over here, we're an Orthodox Jewish channel over here. So I learned while training in my smicha exams that Moses Mendelssohn at the time, who was very much connected to the Haskalah movement, many of his descendants would, let's just say, go off the derech itself, and it's not used necessarily in favorable terms in the Orthodox community. I'm going to state that from the outset over here. But he himself seemingly would use Moses Mendelssohn as a guide, also Rabbi Hartwig Wesley, and he next made his, let's say, name celebrated in connection with the religious philosophy, and became indeed to the Italian Jews what, let's say, at that point in time, Mendelssohn was to the German co-religionists. Now remember, I think there's huge difference between let's just say, maybe to some degree, religious observance and what actually happened between Germany and Italy, respectively, in the rabbinic sphere at that point in time, even if they, maybe you could say, they appreciated each other to a specific degree. I think Rabbi Reggio would publish at Venice an appeal in Italian for the establishment of a rabbinical seminary, arguing that just as emperor did not desire rabbis devoid of philosophical training, neither did the Jews desire rabbis who had no rabbinical education. And this would eventually be like, let's say, the seeds to the establishment of a rabbinical college in Padua. Obviously, Rabbi Reggio would draw up the statutes and the educational program over there, which is chronicled over, which we have to point over. I think he endeavored to extend the knowledge of Hebrew among the Jewish masses over there. He would translate the Bible into Italian, write a commentary thereon. And I think, let's just say, he had a clear, and many would have said an attractive style, which would make a deep impression not only on Italian but even German Jews also. So seemingly he was very much connected to the German Jewry also at various different stages of time, which we also have to point out, which is very interesting enough. So anyone just tuning in at the moment, we're speaking about the history of the Rabbinate, the Rabbinical College of Padua in Italy, something that we've spoken about on various occasions before, something that we've tried to record for a while. Okay, so I think, let's just say, I think, yeah, so he was an integral part, let's just say, in of itself. This Rabbi Reggio happened to have been, and he was an integral part of the college. I think he would write various different works, including the Ma'amar Torah Min HaShamayim, printed in Vienna in the year 1818, Sefer Torah Elohim, 1821, Behinat Hadat Im Perush, I think 1833, Igrot Yashar, printed, I think, completed in 1836, Ma'amar HaTigalit in 1835, and various other writings also. I think he would write a metrical Italian translation of the book of Isaiah at one point in time, tractate to Pirkei Avot, using various different correspondences also of various other Rabbonim, and so on and so forth. So yeah, so he was also an integral part His name being, just to give precise, Rabbi Yitzhak Samuel Reggio or Rabbi Isaac Samuel Reggio. So he passed away in 1855. So we have to state that in the onset. So that's very, very interesting. So these were integral parts, let's just say, in of itself, within regards to the seminary. Okay, now I want to, more can be said within regards to it. That I think Padua itself happens to have a famous synagogue, which is called Great Italian Synagogue. I don't know how connected it was to the Rabbinical Seminary or not. It was an Orthodox Jewish congregation, and that was located in San Martino, I think Padua, respectively, in Veneto, in Italy. I think it was completed itself in the year 1548. And I think, yes, it was built many, many years ago, near 500 years ago. I think it would go under renovation in 1581, 1631, 1830, 1865. It would be closed in 1892 until a more modern synagogue, but would open after the war in 1943. I think the fascists would burn down the modern synagogue in of itself. And yeah, much can be said about it. I think architecturally, it is very, very well known, and much is documented within regards to it. I think it's got Ezrat Nashim, also historic Ezrat Nashim, as it's known as, and much can be said within regards to the Padua Synagogue, which is a very, very famous place in of itself. Now, there's a very, very detailed. Okay, now let's speak about Padua itself. In of itself, I think the community, Jewish community itself in Padua, would start in the late 13th century and was ruled by the Carassi family. I think he was between 1318 to 1405, and I think there was peaceful conditions initially, and then the Venetian Republic would take over and would make a worsening of conditions. This was in the year 1405 onwards. The Jewish people were permitted to graduate from the city's prestigious university, I think, and Jews would be segregated into a ghetto in 1603, an area adjacent to the Piazza della Erba, and that would be the place for the Jewish community at that point in time. And much can be said about it. And I think there was a segregation order that had been dropped, I think, in the years, I think it was when the French arrived in 1797, and would be restored when the city came under Austro-Hungarian rule, and more full equality reported will be granted in 1866 with the city's annexation to the Kingdom of Italy. And much more can be said within regards to that. But now I found a very, very detailed article, I think, on the internet within regards to the seminary, where I think they actually compare it to the Breslau seminary itself, respectively. Remember, in Europe at that point in time, in the 1800s, 1900s, there was various different rabbinical seminaries at that stage in time, which we also have to point out, which is very, very important. You know, much is chronicled within regards to the history of the community of Padua. The Jewish community itself had a famous Jewish community over there. It was obviously, let's just say, there was a community center, I think, at one stage in time, a large one in Padua, respectively. And yeah, obviously this place was, I think 1829, it was known as the Istituto Convitto Rabbinico, respectively, which we said in of itself, which will be opened and reopened on various occasions or times, which you have to point out. I think there's a very, very detailed, let's just say, article which speaks about the history, where they couple it together with a history of the Breslau Jewish Theological Seminary and the Rabbinic College of Padua, and they compare it together. This article specifically does. So we will actually look into this now. We're going to be privileged. Now I want to give thanks to, I think the author of this was a woman of the name Irene Cajon, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it will be a detailed article of the Rabbinical College, comparing it to the Rabbinical Theological Seminary of Breslau in of itself, and comparing differences in of itself. Now we're going to concentrate in this article. I think it was came into on the internet itself. I'm not sure when it was exactly printed, but on 15th of April 2016, it was actually published on this itself. Now, this article itself would speak about the differences between the two places, respectively. Now, the Breslau Seminary, the author would speak about, and the Collegio Rabbinico of Padua, the rabbinical, let's just say, seminary in itself. They were both founded in the 19th century, and obviously it was a process of emancipation, Association of the Jewish community, I think at that point in time, and the article will basically over here, which I'm using over in the researchgate.net, would let's just compare the two schools. I think they had deep affinities, let's just say in itself. And she shows differences regarding circumstances leading to their founding and nature of the Jewish context of which they're part of, and their courses and programs and the fundamental inspiration between them. I think the author says on the outset that both schools prematurely, but for different reasons, let's just say there was a new life in North America at that point in time. And the author does speak about Rabbi Sabato Morias, another rabbi who's spoken about on this series before. He happened to have been from Livorno and ties with the Jewish community of Padua, and was familiar also with Central European Jewry, and was the founder and the president of the Jewish Theological Seminary of New York. Remember, I think the Jewish Theological Seminary of New York originally was Orthodox in the very, very early years. I have to point that out. Later, I think now it's under conservative flagship, if I'm not mistaken. And the author here will compare the two schools and their, let's say, the influence they have on American Judaism in of itself. Now, I think the Breslau seminary, I think, was founded in 1854 in of itself. I think obviously it would be a more Ashkenazic seminary, respectively. We're not going to speak about the Breslau seminary now over here, because we're trying to concentrate here on the Padua seminary, but she does speak a lot about the Padua seminary respectively. I think for example, the author does speak that the Rabbinical College of Padua was different in some ways to the Breslau one, and let's just say the impulse behind it came from outside, and the origins were combined by both from traditionalists and the reforming wings of Italian-speaking Jewry, which was, I think, in the main disposed towards dialogue with non-Jewish world and modern culture at that point in time. That's what the author says. The author quotes an Italian researcher of the name Maddalena del Blanco Cotrosio, who was, let's say, reconstructed the history of the College of Padua with many details and documents recalled in a contribution, synthetically giving results of investigation. However, I think the Congress of Vienna in 1815, let's just say the tolerance of Habsburgs had shown since end of 18th century for the various religions to be found in the empire, which were in principle the same level of Catholic Christianity. Remember, that was a big problem at that point in time, and so on and so forth. So I think from the Padua College originated in two regulations. I think the Sovereign Resolution of January 1820 and the Sovereign Resolution setting up the school apparently on the 8th of November in 1825, respectively. Now, more can be said within regards to it. I think the work on the rabbinical school itself would start between the years 1820 to 1825. Representatives of the Jewish community would very much be involved within it. Lombardy and Veneto would promote, let's say, the imperial authority at that point in time, and there was people that had responsibility of the Jewish community of Milan at that point in time. I think there was connections with Padua, Verona, Roviglia, and other small communities of some small towns, let's just say, in of itself, would have a role in itself. And the school would be founded, the Rabbinic Seminary, in the 1829. And I think at that point in time, there was a specific conference which was founded in Padua, would get a strong support till 1836. And Padua was the location of the college. I think it was a city of ancient community. That was one of the reasons. It was a center of Jewish culture, especially of the Middle Ages. That was another reason why. The Faculty of Medicine at the university had been, let's say, welcomed Jewish students from every part of Europe for several centuries, let's say, giving rise to a lively, cosmopolitan, intellectual environment at that point in time. Also, I think the conference, there was a specific conference over there, will, let's say, welcome the suggestion that reach it, not only for the rabbis of the various communities who were closely tied to traditional studies, living in geographical area involved. They express a need for profound renewal of Judaism at that point in time. I think there was connection also with the Enlightenment movement at that stage in time. So that was there was some influence in regards to that, and more can be said about it. And I think they would teach us. The school of Padua was a result of common effort that was internal, but I think the article says, author states over here, it was a sense of external needs and suggestions. The Jewish communities at that point in time, they would choose teachers for the school. And I think they nominated Rabbi Samuel David Luzzatto, the great nephew of the Ramchal. He was born in Trieste. I think he was at that stage in time 27 years old. He was seen very, very intellectually by the people and demonstrated as a historian of Jewish religious literature, let's say a rigorous Hebrew scholar he was. And there was, at that point in time, the 24-year-old Rabbi Lelo della Torre from Cunha. I think he was very highly esteemed as a Hebrew poet and a great orator at that point in time. And it's, the author states themselves that they were strictly orthodox within regards to halacha, but they were tolerant and had good relations for, let's say, supporting a more modern approach also, let's just say, in of itself. And the author itself, as we said before, is going to elaborate within regards to the Breslau seminary, how maybe it differed in some specific small ways to the Italian Rabbinic Seminary. I think, so just go back, as we're just going to progress this article over here, because once again, we're using this from researchgate.net. The author will speak about the Breslau Seminary in of itself, and then we'll go back to the Padua Seminary, the Rabbinical College of Padua. And the author will describe it as being more conservative in comparison to the Breslau, let's say, Rabbinical Seminary. How was that? Then, let's say, I think Rabbi Luzzatto, for example, using evidence from the document which would testify, was in charge of the teaching which would appear under the heading of the oral subjects, exegesis, the linguistics, history and theology in Judaism. And I think Rabbi Del Torre was in charge of the teaching of traditional subjects, Jewish rites, homiletics, and the college did not, let's say, offer, in of itself, it's reported, over courses for those who were not intending to become rabbis. The traditional aim of the institute to form rabbis for the Italian-speaking Jewish communities. There was correspondence, let's say, perfectly to the personalities of the two teachers who had essentially been educated in their families and religious communities, with the primary loyalty to Jewish piety and traditional, although they were great, let's just say, self-taught readers, they especially they were connected to texts in Greek, Latin, Italian, and French texts, respectively, which we also have to point out over here inside, just using this article. And they actually chronicle over more information. I think the college's program from itself, I think there's a regulations, or as I say, curriculato, I think will be published in Venice in 1827, would contain the admission procedure for students for the school calendar. I think there was a specific bar within regards to entering it, and that hours of lessons, nominations of teachers, for example, and a course on Bible was offered. There was comments on Rabbi David ben Joseph Kimchi, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Yehuda Abarbanel, Rabbi Abraham ibn Ezra. I think they would study the teachings over there, teaching of Talmud, respectively also Yad Malachi, which was published in the year 1767 in Livorno. Rabbi Yosef Kara's commentary on, let's say, the Bet Yosef will be studied. Also, Hebrew philology was also used as text. Leshem Limudim by Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, obviously the great uncle of the Shadal of Rabbi Shmuel Luzzatto, the Militzat Yesharim, and I think a book from Rabbi Solomon Lowen's son, and the Bechinat Olam, I think Rabbi Yedidia Bedersi, I think we will study the Tariq mitzvot, 600 mitzvot of the Maimonides, and Aaron Levi, and they would go on and forth speaking about, relating over various sermons of other famous rabbis, including Rabbi Yosef ben Chaim Sarfati and Rabbi Azaria Figo. I think he was in Venice in 1648. Jewish history and theology wasn't necessarily the central part of the curriculum in Jewish schools in the past, and they didn't necessarily there was no introductory or support text. I think future teachers were invited to organize lessons themselves. I think Jewish theology, there was various sermons from the Nefshot Yehuda and the commentary of the Kol Yehuda of the Kuzari from 1140, respectively, and others. I think, obviously, we mentioned about Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. I think he lived in the first half of the 18th century and was regarded as one of the famous rabbis of Padua in Venice at that point in time. And much was spoken about him within regards to itself, respectively, also, which you have to point out. And and so I think it's also stated over the author states, when the programs of the college in Padua were implemented, two reforming figures of German Jewry objected to them as being on it, and someone else also, respectively. So that's very important. Now, they do state over here, the author does, when they're comparing the Breslau seminary and the Padua one, that there was a common teaching activity that was going on over there. They didn't necessarily give much space, this is what the author says, to mystical Jewish tradition. The directors, let's say, were more appreciative of the, let's just say, of the approach that they had in of itself, which very much we have to speak about also. And the author does also, when they're comparing the Breslau seminary, does share the rationalist outlook about Jewish learning. The two institutions would differentiate. The German-speaking one seemed to favor an analysis of the sources of Judaism using modern scientific and historical tools with the aim of abandoning older, no longer valid approaches. That's what they felt. As I said before, I'm not agreeing with them. While obviously the Italian college seemed to want to use the same tools to revive the Jewish tradition, which was to be welcomed in every aspect over here. This is what the author says. Both schools, I think, wanted to preserve the mitzvot, but I think the Breslau seminary, when comparing the one to the Padua seminary itself, was cautiously welcoming, let's say, towards desire of changes. It was more, let's say, trying to make things more modernized or reformized, and Padua was more conservative, as the author had stated beforehand from the outset over here, just to be pointed out. And Rabbi Samuel the Shadal himself declared himself hostile to the very idea of a conference of Italian rabbis about various subjects might have been connected to the Breslau seminary as itself. And I think he would have a correspondence with Rabbi Yitzhak Samuel Reggio in the year 1838 to 1839 respectively. And what's interesting, I think more can be stated over. So the author over here will talk more about the Breslau seminary respectively, and we'll talk about that in more, let's just say, specific detail. I think it's an article, I think, that is on the researchgate.net website, which I recommend everyone to look at. I mean, as from a historical point of view, if you want to know the history within regards to that. I think that the author does continue and state that the general outlook of the Rabbinical College of Padua was not seen as a theoretic faculty, the intellect that presides over knowledge of nature and history, but was combining with feeling and therefore definable as common sense or sound human intellect. Rabbi Luzzatto, I think, would explain in his autobiography later on, he did not necessarily like the Maimonides' rationalism in the Guide of Perplexed and in Mishnah Torah, or philosophy built on the use of pure theoretic reason. I think he liked what he liked since adolescence. This is what the author says, as he writes in his recollections, was to read Cicero and English empiricists, the French sensationalists, the Catholic thinkers of his time, such as someone named Francesco Soava, who was regarded as persecutor of the liberal Catholic thinkers, active to create a link between sense and reason, tradition and national criticism, faith and reasoning. I'm reading the article here from researchgate.net over here, if anyone is tuning in at the moment. And I think Rabbi Luzzatto, Rabbi the Shadal, was fairly suspicious, let's just say. I think they are deriving this section from the text, let's say, of the Duso Illustro Nelle Sue Tiroke, and so on and so forth, and which was printed at Padua in 1848, about enthusiasm many of his co-religionists in the peninsula for the Risorgimento, which aimed to create a liberal Italian state. So he wasn't necessarily for that. He didn't share the idea grounded on faith, customs inherited from tradition, or the memory of the past. Rabbi Luzzatto did not share the idea of progress that other Italian Jews of his age strongly supported. And I think the terminology the author would use here, he would reject fanaticism, intolerance, and harshness. And I think his correspondence in Hebrew shows would show him being on warm terms with many, let's say, exponents of the Wissenschaft der Juntement, the movement which firstly introduced a modern scientific point of view of Judaism, respectively. I think that we have to point out also. So very interesting. It's very, very detailed article here on the researchgate.net website. And the author will conclude that the Rabbinical College of Padua, let's just say, was, I think there was various different internal external causes for problems that might have occurred through the years. I think Rabbi Luzzatto was an animating director, let's just say. He passed away in 1865. He would be replaced by Yehud Lully, who had been, I think, his pupil, who took on the role of chief rabbi, so become chief rabbi of Padua community in 1869. 1871, I think the school would close at that point in time, as we said at onset. There was a period of serious financial difficulties, I think, and there was a reduction in students, and because I think in 1886, someone named Rabbi Lombardi, I think it was Rabbi, and Veneto were no longer governed by the Habsburgs, but by the Italian state. I think that was proclaimed in 1861. And in 1870, the conquest of Rome and the collapse of the Pope's temporal power had shifted the geographical center of gravity of Italian-speaking Jews from the northeast towards the center of Italy at that point in time. And there was a creation of a new rabbinical school in need over there. In 1887, the author states, a rabbinical college was operative in Rome, and that would present itself, let's say, as the heir of the Padua College. It was connected to it, but was unable to continue, let's say, the very strong research work, particularly in the fields of linguistics and Jewish theology. And the school entered, I think, in competition with the School of Livorno, which was directed by Rabbi Ben Moser, who we mentioned about before, whose mysticisms was quoted earlier. Rabbi Luzzatto had sharply, apparently criticized until 1900, the year when he passed away. I think the Shadal passed away in 1865, if I'm not mistaken. It was Rabbi Ben Moser that passed away in 1900, which we have to point out. I think the years 1899 and 1922, the Rabbinical College was transferred from Rome to Florence. And I think at that point in time, Rabbi Sam Hirsch Margulis was a chief rabbi of Lemberg in Galicia, was gathered around him significant figures from the Italian Jewish world, such as another famous rabbi we've spoken about before, Rabbi Umberto Cassuto, who maybe we'll speak about in a minute time also in this video itself. Let's just say respectfully, and various, I think, Italian people from the Italian Zionistic movement, let's just say, in of itself. And we have to point out, I think in 1922 there was a cause for the return of the Rabbinical College of Rome. That specific year, and much has been talked about it. I think the Rabbinical College in Rome has a bibliographical center. I think that's actually chronicled. There was a library, that had been created at a Padua Institute. I think in its glory days, as the Luzzatto archive was a collection of materials, I think some of them unpublished, notebooks, diaries, and letters, within regards to the Shadal, self-respected Rabbi Samuel David Luzzatto, which we have to point over. So more is commented within regards to the two seminaries itself. I think it's a detailed article that will also speak about the Breslau Rabbinical College, so that we have to point out also. So once again, thanks very much within regards to that. And let's speak a bit about Rabbi Cassuto also. He's a famous man of yesteryear. Very, very famous man. I think there was his full name was Rav Moshe David Umberto Cassuto. He lived between 1883 to 1951. So obviously he had some sort of connection. He was a historian, a rabbi. I think very much connected to the University of Florence, University of Rome, La Sapienza, and I think born in Florence. I think he studied in the University of Florence. He graduated in 1906, and he received smicha, I believe, and would teach in various institutions over there. And his principal happened to be Rabbi Shmuel Hirsch Margulis, I think we mentioned that before. Between 1922 to 1925, he became the chief rabbi of Florence, and take on various different important roles. Also, on board to do, but I do believe he did have he was a big author also, but he would have connections to the Rabbinical Seminary also in Italy, which we also have to point out, which is very, very interesting. And this college was an interesting one, and much has been chronicled within regards to it. There was issues, I think, relations with problems with the Christian population over there at various different occasions in time, which is very, very much well chronicled over. And the Jews of Padua itself, I think, would be working in money transactions around that specific period of time. They had various economic missions, which proved to be very highly beneficial to the district they lived in. And I think at that point in time there was a demand for money, both by authorities and by private individuals, and various loans had to be given out. And they would not impose heavy terms and high rates of interest, let's just say, in themselves respectively. So much is actually chronicled over. I think there's many Jewish merchants at that point in time. They actually say that the majority of the Jews of Padua were, let's say, not necessarily engaged in money transactions, but dealt in merchandise at various different points in time. So that's very much chronicled over, and we've spoken about on various occasions before within regards to that. So today, friends, if you're tuning in, we're speaking about the famous Rabbinic Seminary of Padua, which is very, very important. I think, let's just say, important to speak about this. I think this Padua Rabbinic Seminary will try and enrich heritage, and was, let's say, it's coined as the first modern rabbinical school founded in 1829. And there was other, let's just say, famous rabbis that were involved, not just the Shadal, also another Rabbi Meir Katzenelbogen, another person that maybe we should speak about. Himself. I think so let's speak about him, because much was connected also to the Padua synagogue. So I believe they do speak that it was connected to him, but I'm not too sure when he actually passed away in of itself. So I think there's various different people that will do a podcast in regards to him. Reported over he was a rabbi in Padua, and he was born actually in Prague, if I'm not mistaken, in I think 1492. This is the time period of the Spanish Inquisition at that stage in time. So much has been chronicled within regards to him. Much more can be said within regards to Padua Jewish community of the last 100 years, but now I think this is very, very, very important subject to speak about the Rabbinic Seminary. We've spoken about the Italian one already, and this book, the Jewish Theological Seminary of Breslau and the Rabbinic College of Rome, I think was actually published as a book, if I'm not mistaken, at a time period quite recently here from the time of recording, here in 2025. So more can be said within regards to that. I would recommend everyone to look. I think there's even available now, even manuscripts of the Rabbinic College of Italy. I think it's actually found somewhere. It's actually chronicled over. So everyone also to look about that. I think, they're numbered in different numbers, let's just say. And I think it was reproduced, the manuscripts on microfilm, and available to consultation on the digital library of the National Library of Israel, respectively. So that is also very, very interesting to know. So very interesting topics over here. We really want to record this video for a long time, and thank God we are actually speaking about it. I think the Museo Ebraico Padova will actually also have a lot of information in regards to a place which maybe people will also see as a form of research. I think there's famous Jewish Heritage Museum Padua, which will also elaborate with regards to this specific importance as the itself. I think it was the largest of Padua synagogues, and now is a museum. I think at that point in time, I think it would move from places, especially in 1682, to an upper floor, I think, respectively, and various other places also. I think it's chronicled over that in 1892 the synagogue adopted the Italian rite of prayer and remained the city's only active synagogue at that point in time. And I think come up May 1943, the temple, unfortunately, I think temple will burn down, and it was left in ruins after the war. And the Aron, the Ark, other elevators that was donated in 1956, the Yad Eliyahu synagogue in Tel Aviv, were where they are still in use, I think, and was rebuilt at various stages of time after. So that's very, very interesting. So it's a special edition. We were speaking about the Rabbinic College of Italy, of Padua, respectively. And we've already recorded over biography videos many of the rabbis that we've spoken about on various occasions before, especially today we've spoken about them. Also, much information can be found online within regards to this famous rabbi over here. So thanks everyone for watching. There's for example, I think there's 176 members at the moment of the Jewish community of Padua. I think it's actually still considered very, very vibrant, and known as doing international cultural initiatives on a senior level over there, let's just say premium level, respectively, and much more can be said about that. So I think we can leave it over here. I think it's a detailed account to some degree of the Padua Jewish community, respectively. It's very, very important to speak about, and much more. So friends, subscribe to the channel. We're nearing 7,500 subscribers. Have a great day, and thanks everyone. It was a special edition where we spoke about the Italian Rabbinic College over here. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thank you.